get started for the sake of time so we can get you all out of here on time. So you'll see that the first half of our agenda today was really focused on our operational readiness for the 2020 census, the end-to-end test, the 2016 census test. In addition to talking about all of those very detailed yet somewhat high-level designs that we have to have, we also are busy, very busy, executing on a number of ongoing programs. And so we didn't want to miss the opportunity to do some operational updates on some of those programs themselves. Clearly, in the time we have, we can't update on all of them, but for this program management review, we're going to do updates on 4 of our programs. Our geographic programs, our consultations, our tribal consultations, and then our 2 contracts for which we have requests for proposals out as we speak. So with that as background, I'm going to turn the floor over to Greg Hanks, who's going to begin with an update on our geographic programs.
Thank you, Lisa. Again, I'm Greg Hanks from the Census Geography Division. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. Like Lisa said, I'm going to give a quick update on some of the preparations for the 2020 geographic programs. So the 2020 census expects and requires the best possible address list and geographic boundary framework to enumerate the population, collect data in the office and in the field, and create accurate and timely data products. We'll be offering several geographic partnership programs in the years leading up to the 2020 census to ensure we have the best possible versions of this data. The Boundary and Annexation Survey, or BAS, is our principal source of updates to legal boundaries in the Census Bureau's MAF-TIGER system. By legal, we're talking here about boundary updates that require an ordinance, statute, or other law to take effect. This can include city and town incorporations, county boundary changes, and changes to American Indian reservation and off-reservation trust land boundaries. We'll invite all legal governments to provide updates to their boundaries via the BAS each year up to and including 2020. We offer digital and paper response options for the BAS, and extensive training materials are available for participants. I wanted to point out that the GUPS software that's being demoed out in the technology demo is one of the digital participation options we're providing for BAS starting this year. A quick note on the schedule for the BAS this year, and this schedule basically repeats each year leading up to and including 2020. 2 key dates I want to point out are March 1st, which is the deadline for a BAS boundary participant for their updates to be included in the Population Estimates program, and also in the next sample selection for the American Community Survey. And the second date is May the 31st, which is the deadline for boundary updates to be reflected in the materials for the next year's BAS program. The Local Update of Census Addresses, or LUCA program, provides local governments with an opportunity to review and update the Bureau's address list prior to the beginning of 2020 enumeration and field operations. The program is made possible under Title 13 by the Census Address List Improvement Act of 1994. The Bureau conducted versions of the LUCA program for the 2000 and the 2010 censuses. For 2020, here is a short list of program improvements we're looking forward to implementing based on participant feedback, lessons learned, and extensive research over the past few years. And I'll quickly go through the bullets. Again, we're hoping to simplify program participation options. We'll be providing census structure coordinates. These are latitude, longitude coordinates, and allow partners to provide their own coordinates back to the Bureau. We're encouraging local governments to work with larger governments to roll up where possible and consolidate their submissions. This time, advance notice and invitation packages will go to the governor's office to facilitate and encourage state participation. And we're working with state partners to provide them with registration and participation information from participants within their state so they know what's going on. Quick schedule, preliminary schedule for the LUCA program. Most of our activity happens in the beginning of 2017. Advanced notice packages will go out in January. An invitation package will go out later that summer, and then the earnest review of the LUCA submissions will be happening in the early part of 2018. The Participant Statistical Areas Program, or PSAP, is how the Bureau gathers updates to the statistical geographic areas we maintain and use for tabulation and data products. The PSAP program is critical because it is the source of quality for the Bureau's smallest geographies, such as block group and tract. PSAP, and actually I should have said this for GUPS, or for LUCA also, are also going to be using that GUPS software that's being demoed on the technology display out in the hallway. And just a quick look at the PSAP schedule. Again, we've got some activity happening this year, some planning and preparation in 2016 with some involvement with the states. But you can see that real activity as far as PSAP returns doesn't start until late 2018. So I'm now going to, in the interest of timing, turn this presentation over to Dee Alexander, who's going to speak with us about tribal consultations.
Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Dee Alexander. I am the Tribal Affairs Coordinator for the Census Bureau. I work out of the Office of Congressional Intergovernmental Affairs, and my role is to assist the Director and Deputy Director and Census Bureau staff in all tribal consultations. I'm going to brief you a little bit about our tribal consultation meetings that we have been conducting. Lessons learned from our 2007 tribal consultation meetings were to meet early in the decade before decisions were made. With that being said, we started our tribal consultations 2 years earlier than last decade. Director Thompson requested in the fall of 2014 that a tribal consultation planning team to be formed, and we kicked off that team in January of 2015. The Census Bureau has conducted 6 of the 8 scheduled tribal consultation meetings with federally recognized tribes that started in October 2015 and will end in April. We're going to end with a 2 half-day national webinar on April 6th and 7th from 1 to 5 p.m. The Census Bureau, as you know, takes seriously the United States Trust responsibility to the Indian tribes and Alaska Native peoples of our country and adheres to Executive Order 13175, which is the consultation and coordination with Indian tribal governments that requires the federal agencies to conduct consultations with federally recognized tribal governments prior to any planning or decision-making that impacts or could impact these tribal governments. The Census Bureau has its own tribal consultation and coordination policy that was signed in October 2008 at the National Congress of American Indians, and this policy outlines 9 principles that are to be followed in all Census Bureau interactions with federally recognized tribes. The purpose of these tribal consultations are to improve communications with tribal officials, create an opportunity for American Indian and Alaska Native governments to raise issues, and Census Bureau to gain insight. These meetings have provided a forum for tribes to share insights, make recommendations, and discuss concerns related to the 2020 census. We also are part of our outreach to doing tribal consultations is to provide early notification of plans for the 2020 census and to build collaboration on issues of mutual concern and involve tribes in the decision-making process. Director Thompson announced our plans for tribal consultations at the National Congress of American Indians Midsummer Conference last July of 2015. And with all federal agencies hearing from the tribes when it came to tribal consultations, 30 days notice for tribal consultations is kind of like the framework, but we gave them a 90-day notice. So we sent out a letter from the director, an invitation letter about these meetings in July. We also sent out a Federal Register notice to get the tribes prepared for these meetings. At the tribal consultations, these are some of the topics that we went over. We had a set agenda. We also asked for any input from the tribes on that agenda, so they were welcome to submit any information that they wanted prior to the meetings. We talked about enumeration, communications, population statistics, partnerships, geography, and recruiting. For the subject of enumeration, at each meeting or agenda, let's see, some tribes reported that the internet response is currently not a viable option for members and requested an in-person enumerator specifically and to specifically hire a local tribal person. As we all know, connectivity is an issue in rural areas, and that has come to our knowledge when we met with the Alaska Natives, Navajo Nation, and the Pueblos in New Mexico. We also learned that the communication via Facebook is an increasingly common social media platform that tribes are using to connect with tribal members. It was told by tribal participants that the elders would more likely fill out their form if a tribal leader asked them to, and that the younger generation will go online and respond. We also know to hire locally, and we've heard that again, to assist with the enumeration because there's a trust issue. For the population statistics portion, tribal enrollment, we heard that concerns were expressed regarding the appropriate ways in which tribal enrollment could be collected. Most cite it's a sovereign issue and are concerned about different enrollment criteria from tribe to tribe. If you can imagine, there are 566 federally recognized tribes, each with their different tribal enrollment criteria. So we are looking into that as a possible separate topic, but we are just currently now doing the research on that. A few tribes did mention, though, however, that we're open to using enrollment data for educational and programmatic purposes. Under the coding and classification, the tribes were interested in how American Indian and Alaska Native responses from the race question were coded, classified, and tabulated under each federally recognized tribal name, and felt this knowledge would help them elicit a better response. As we've been learning for the last 2 decades, we provide them a kind of a coding list, but with the federally recognized tribes, they're like, use the list that comes out from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. That is our federally recognized name, and we know that, but we're just going back to making sure if there's any other new classifications. For instance, the Navajo Nation, their Indian name is Dene, and we heard that last decade, so if anybody writes down Dene, we know that that's Navajo Nation. For partnerships, for geography, the tribes express appreciation for information about the geography programs, and some tribes requested one-on-one training. With partnership specialists will work with tribal governments to improve the tribal geographic participation. So all of this information that we've been providing was kind of new to some folks, and some folks already knew about our programs. So that was kind of good to learn as well, listening to their input. For the partnership program, there were tribal participants who sat in the room who served as tribal liaisons in the past censuses, and they provided insight for Census and other tribes about the American Indian Alaska Native program. The Tribal Government Liaison Program was well received last decade, and they most expressed a desire that it was a census-funded position. It's not, it's a voluntary position, but we did have over 500 tribes that participated in that program. The Tribal Complete Count Committee was also documented as one of the more successful outreach efforts on tribal lands, and working with American Indian Alaska Native urban organizations was recognized to be important. For recruiting, many tribal participants worked during prior censuses in positions such as enumerators, LCO managers, partnership specialists. It was interesting to see the folks that were sitting at the table that were familiar with the census and actually worked for us in 2010. They definitely said they were willing to assist in all phases of recruiting. And with communications, they told us, of course, that via Facebook was the best method for communications for their tribal members, tribal newspapers, and tribal radio. Key messaging is of critical importance to garner tribal members to participate in the census was also heard. The Census Bureau has 6 regional offices, as you know, and we scheduled 2 of the meetings within the Denver and LA region due to the number of tribal governments in their regions. It was our strategy to conduct these meetings around National American Indian and Alaska Native regional conferences such as MASS, NCAI, and AFN. Director Thompson attended 2 of these meetings. He attended the AFN conference and the meeting of the El Pueblos Council of Governors in New Mexico. Director Potok attended the meeting for the National Congress of American Indians in San Diego. There have been a total of 73 tribes who participated in these meetings. While the tribal number reflects 73, it doesn't reflect that we may have had other tribal representatives sitting at the table that came from that particular tribe. For instance, the Alaska meeting had 26 participants, but it's showing here specifically their tribes that they represented. Our next meeting is going to be conducted next Friday at the Sitting Bull College in Fort Yates, North Dakota, which is also a Census Information Center. And our last meeting in March is going to be held around the Department of Interior's Tribal Interior Budget Council meeting here in Washington, D.C., and then we'll follow up with our national webinar April 6th and 7th. And with that, here's a sheet showing our tribal consultation team, point of contacts. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to call me or Mary Bucci or anybody on the staff list for any follow-up. And with that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Alexa Jones-Putoff for the next presentation.
Thank you, Dee. All right, now we will discuss briefly two of our large contracts, the Census Questionnaire Assistance Contract and the Integrated Communications Contract. The requests for proposals for both contracts were released earlier this month, and we're happy to say that we're in position to award these contracts about a year earlier than last decade. The 2020 Census Questionnaire Assistance Operation, or CQA, is at its core an expanded and enhanced form of the 2010 Telephone Questionnaire Assistance, or TQA, operation. CQA has two primary functions. The first is to assist respondents by providing information about specific items on census forms and answering general questions related to the census. This includes assisting people who need help understanding a specific question or topic on the census form. For respondents contacting CQA by telephone, interactive voice response, or IVR, which will be a first tier of assistance to the caller. If the IVR system is unable to resolve the caller's question, the caller can be transferred to a live agent at that point or upon request at any point in the system. In 2020, we're looking to innovate and make it more convenient for respondents to get assistance with answering the census. So in addition to telephone, respondents will be able to use other electronic modes such as web chat and email to get help. The other primary function of CQA is to provide an operation for respondents to complete a census interview over the phone. This is a function that's greatly expanded relative to the 2010 TQA operation. Excuse me. All right, to fulfill those functions, the 2020 CQA operation includes several scope areas, both in terms of physical infrastructure and operations. Major scope areas for the 2020 CQA operation include a contact center infrastructure over multiple brick and mortar sites, as well as all aspects of operations, including agents and support staff. Inbound operations to provide assistance and ultimately facilitate response to the 2020 census. This includes the development of an interactive voice response system, the IVR system, which will play a key role in the number of calls that are ultimately handled by a live CQA agent. The idea here is that we can answer most of the questions, or at least a good chunk of the questions, through the IVR system, that by the time people get to the agent, they're going to be ready and willing to hopefully answer the census or get their final questions answered and then move along in their answering of it online. Another major scope area is the outbound operation, which will be utilized to verify previously supplied respondent information. And additionally, we anticipate that CQA operation will include IVR capability and functionality to support the hiring and recruiting of field staff. While 2020 CQA is an operation under the umbrella of the 2020 Census Program, operation support will also be expected, as Deirdre had mentioned earlier, for tests leading up to the 2020 Census, including the 2017 Census test and the 2018 Census end-to-end test. And I'll talk a little more about these tests in just a moment. And when we talk about data from recent tests, we've looked into data from the 2014 Census test, 2015 Census test, and the 2015 National Content Test, as well as data from the American Community Survey. And we see a dramatic increase in the proportion of households that call our assistance lines relative to 2010. We expect the CQA workload for the 2020 census will be much higher than what we saw in 2010, and there are two main drivers for the increase in CQA workload. The first is the contact volume caused by respondents who do not have access to the internet. With a move to the internet as our primary response mode for the 2020 census, we anticipate many respondents lacking internet access will call our assistance line when they receive the mail piece instructing them to respond to the census on the web. We'll include the phone number on those mail pieces. The second reason for the increased workload is due to the increased average call length of the calls that are received. And this is due in large part to a conscious decision by the Census Bureau to encourage collection of census data when respondents without internet access call our assistance line. The idea is to grab them while they're interested in responding to the census and get their actual responses right there on the phone. We did this a little bit in 2010, but it wasn't something we promoted much, and this will be a greatly expanded piece of the operation. During the 2010 census, we received approximately 4.6 million total inbound calls to our questionnaire assistance lines, requiring approximately 3,000 live agents at peak. And based on recent census tests, we believe that this 2020 CQA operation may receive 20 million or more inbound contacts, needing an estimated 14,000 agents at peak during the 2020 census. So this is a relatively large operation. We can move on to the next. This graphic provides a high-level timeline for the 2020 CQA program. The yellow boxes show a couple acquisition-specific milestones. Earlier this month, as I mentioned, the RFP was released for 2020 CQA, and our plan is to award the contract for CQA in June of this year. On the top of the timeline, the white boxes represent the operations that the 2020 CQA program is expected to support. As Deirdre mentioned earlier, the 2017 census test is the first test the CQA operation will be required to support. CQA will also support the 2018 census end-to-end test and, of course, the 2020 census. For all of these distinct operational periods, April 1st is considered Census Day. Move to the next one, thanks. All right. As I mentioned, there are 3 distinct timeframes that CQA is currently planning to be operational: 2017 census test, 2018 census end-to-end test, and the 2020 census. We've presented some details about the 2017 and 2018 tests here on the slide. It should be noted that full testing plans are still to be determined. For all of the operational timeframes, CQA will be expected to take calls in multiple languages. Based on results from the 2014 and 2015 census tests, as well as the 2015 national contest test, we are currently estimating that about 15% of the housing units will ultimately contact CQA for assistance. You can see the time frame for each of the CQA operations in the 2020 census shown in the table. And as you should note in the 2017 census test column, the time frame between the expected June 2016 contract award date and the start of the operational period in March 2017 is about 9 months. Partly because of the compressed time frame, the minimum requirement for the 2017 census test is the voice channel. Web chat and email will be added by the 2018 census end-to-end test and will, of course, be active for the 2020 census. In terms of the CQA operations, 2017 will be inbound only, while 2018 and the 2020 census will be both inbound and outbound. All right, now I'll talk a little bit about our acquisition strategy for the Census Questionnaire Assistance Contract. This is a full and open competition using FAR Part 15. In November and December, we conducted an advisory down-select process. 4 of the companies that participated in the down-select process were determined to be viable competitors, and we have the list posted on our website in the Business Opportunities section. Once we receive initial proposals, we'll determine a competitive range, and then we'll have oral presentations and discussions. And we'll award based on best value. For the period of performance, we have a base year plus 4 option years, and the life cycle will run from 2016 to 2021. In terms of the contract type, it's a cost reimbursement with the flexibility to consider affirmed fixed price and time and materials for select scope components. And incentives such as award fee and incentive fee will also be considered. We are anticipating a single award. We will do a single award. And the contract includes a small business subcontracting requirement, which is in alignment with the Department of Commerce small business contracting goals. All right, here we have a chart showing the milestones for the 2020 Census Questionnaire Assistance Contract. As you can see by the check marks, we're already well into our list of opportunities to move the CQA contract forward. The most recent 2 are the RFP release that came out on January 6th of 2016. We also held a pre-proposal conference right after that on January 11th. Initial proposals are due February 22nd, And then we'll be working very quickly to turn around the competitive range, do our initial determinations. We'll do the discussions, oral presentations, and site visits in April is our target date at the moment, and final proposals are targeted for May 2nd. And then contract award, we're targeting June 15th, 2016. And now I'll pass it to Tasha and Kendall to talk about integrated communications.
Thank you, Alexa. We're in the home stretch, so we'll finish it off. My name is Tasha Boone and my colleague,
Kendall Johnson.
and we're going to present the integrated communications contract portion. You know, these PMRs are really serious meetings, but I do think we could benefit from a little bit of theme music for each section. So maybe, Kim, we can work on that for the next PMR with Lisa's blessing, maybe. And I think I already know, I picked out what my theme music is. Does anyone know what my theme? Mary Ann, you know what it is? That's right, Star Wars. All right. So moving on. So the integrated communications contract is a procurement for acquiring services for the design, plan, and produce the implementation and monitor the integrated communications program for the 2020 census. And the requirements could include research and data analytics, marketing, advertising, public relation, partnership support, emerging communication technologies, and project management. This contract is important for several reasons, and we've listed some of them here, but to help ensure that we count people once and only once and in the right place is a reason why we have this communications contract. And we want to make sure that we have learned a great deal from our knowledge from the past two censuses regarding this type of contract, and will ensure that this planning process captures all of that knowledge from the past two censuses. So the integrated communications contract is one piece of the entire 2020 Census Integrated Partnership and Communications Program. So this contract helps deliver on a lot of what is being asked of this program. So underneath this program, we have several components. Partnership. Partnership is about connecting with our trusted voices and organizations to carry the decennial message through a vast network throughout the country. I know many of you are aware that in 2010 we had many partnerships, over 257,000 partnerships, and that connected with every segment of society. Social media. It's about creating a 24/7 movement through real-time access, education, and inspiration. As you know, the social media industry is constantly changing and will probably continue to change as we march closer to 2020. We only used this a little bit in 2010, but we anticipate this being a much larger component than we had last time around. Public relations. It's about surrounding every single household in the country with credible, memorable messages through trusted conversations that can motivate people to complete the decennial census. We had many initiatives in 2010 that was a part of this component. Statistics in Schools program. This began in the Census 2000. As the Census in Schools program. It was relaunched in 2010, and it was a huge hit. In order to continue providing this ongoing statistical literacy and education and outreach to students in kindergarten, middle school, high school, including the tribal schools, homeschools, and Head Start, the Census Bureau decided to make this an evergreen program. So after the 2010 census, we continued this program, which had not been done the decade before. And it provides, at the education level, statistics that supports and provides in grade appropriate classroom activities and resources in math and history that are aligned to the national standards. Advertising. Advertising will allow us to reach audiences through mediums that they are familiar with, such as print, radio, newspaper, television, to inform, educate, and inspire people to respond. And then finally, earned media will tap into the vast media network to reach people through identifiable sources that they are used to hearing from. Now I'll turn it over to Kendall Johnson to walk us through the specifics of the contract.
Good afternoon. So prior to issuing an RFP for the 2020 Census Integrated Communications Contract, we conducted market research. We released our request for information on fedbizops.gov as well as on the business opportunities pages within census.gov. This was done on October 1, 2014. We received 32 responses to our RFI. Of those, 19 were from small businesses. The remaining 13 were from large businesses. After reviewing those responses, we held 17 meetings. 7 of those meetings were held with small businesses. We developed a list of questions tailored to each company in order to engage the vendors in targeted discussions. We queried small businesses on the best roles that they could serve in the program, and every meeting that was requested was granted. The 2020 Census Integrated Communications Contract Request for Proposal, or RFP, was issued on January 21st, just last week. We are looking at a full and open competition. The period of performance would be 1 base year plus 5 option years, taking us into 2022. We have very aggressive small business goals. It includes small business subcontracting goals, which are in alignment with the Department of Commerce small business contracting goals. And for this contract, the contractor shall establish, maintain, and adhere to a small business subcontracting plan that commits the maximum practical opportunity for small businesses within the contract. And as you can see, our scheduled award date is August 17th, 2016. On the screen now is a list of our milestones. These milestones were posted to our business opportunities pages on census.gov in October, actually October 27th of 2015. After we released the draft RFP, we held a pre-solicitation conference and a vendor expo on December 18th. There were approximately 127 vendors represented in attendance, and of those, 80 were small businesses. We are on track to award our contract in August of this year, and I'm going to turn it over to Lisa now.
Well, thank you all. I believe we have time for some questions on any of our operational updates, if you have them. Tricia?
Tricia Durr, Office of Inspector General. The Geography, you mentioned that Geography Division at the Bureau is requesting that, we used to talk about 39,000 entities that you would get data from, and now you're talking about 50 states, so that when there's roll-up, that it could be easier, I guess, for the Bureau. But what gets lost, might fall through the cracks? Like I noticed that the whole state of Montana is covered by the state itself, but it's a large state. So what kind of data are you seeing taking a hit when you roll it up to the states?
So Tricia, to clarify, and I'll let Greg jump in with the specifics, we haven't moved from working with all of the general purpose governments. What we're doing is looking to leverage and maximize our ability to get as much partnership data, geographic data from our partners as possible. In some cases, and in several states, which is a good example, we have found that at the state level, they maintain all of, or a vast majority of, all of that local government, the general purpose government information that we would have previously collected individually. But just because we have a state agreement, for example, and I use the word agreement, and it's a memorandum of understanding or a memorandum of agreement with the state, that would not preclude any of the local governments from working with us directly either. I don't know if Greg wants to provide any more details on that.
Right, that kind of covers the basic idea, Lisa. And for both the LUCA program and the BAS program, for 2020, they'll still be directed at every local government. They're intended to be inclusive. What we envision with the state participation, or with the concept of the roll-up, say from city to county, from county to state, is that may have people who before would have opted out opt in if they can take advantage of somebody else being their submitter, if that makes sense. So we are heavily encouraging through our programs this decade smaller governments to look at a consolidated option to encourage their participation, not to say, listen, you stand aside, the state will report for you. That's not the idea.
Other questions? Ty?
You call me? I'm sorry. Yeah, just a couple, real quick. Thank you for this information. On Alexa, I think about, maybe or someone else in 2020, back on the CQA, the outbound operations, right? Is there something kind of defined what we're going to do there? Or is that kind of a placeholder for coverage follow-up or just edit checks or something? And then what I want to know is the reason behind, is that, I'm sorry, a little closer. Thank you, Kim. Part of my question is, have you thought through whether you're going to just be calling people who have already provided you a telephone number, or is this going to be something like SIFU last time on where you have to deal with administrative records and something else and trying to figure out how to contact people? I just want to know if that scope has kind of been thought through yet.
I will probably let people who've been here longer than I jump in on the rest of this, but just in brief, I would say we are planning to use that as an option to recontact people who have been in contact before. So it's not as a first contact through the CQA operation.
So you're not going to do like a SIFU-like thing with
So
that part of the contract?
the long and short of it is the potential is there in the contract vehicle for us to exercise that option should we determine it. We are just standing up the detailed planning for those operations, and as we make those decisions, we'll have that answer. But in the RFP that we put out, we allowed ourselves the option to execute it that way, should we choose to.
And you're not off the hook, Tasha. Real quick, you're describing a program that's going to involve communications directorate, field directorate, 2020. I don't think Nancy Potok is going to be managing this operation, but she's up top all of this. Can you just give me like 3 sentences about what the governance structure is, kind of like making sure the expectations are met, the requirements are defined, and back and forth, because you get different people delivering different expectations. Can you just a little bit how that's set up?
I can jump in. Thank you. That was an easy question. Oh, I was going to say it's the slide that that was presented earlier on the governance structure that we're going to be following that. We actually have an integrated partnership and communications team that we're kicking off as one of the integrated project teams, and we would have done it this week, but with the snow, we're doing it next week. And so underneath that team, it will have diverse divisions and directorates represented as a part of that team to help implement not only the planning process, but also as we go through the implementation process and resolving issues and products and so forth. And we'll develop everything collaboratively, schedule, plans, et cetera. But I'll turn it over to Deirdre. Okay.
And same for CQA. Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? I see one. Tricia.
Yes. Dee, I was just going to ask if languages have come up. You mentioned like the number of individual tribes and also like their own names for their tribes. And I know from work on 2010 that some of the elders and tribal elders only speak their language, for example. And we certainly have languages for a lot of other, nationalities on our forms. So has that come up in your dealings with people?
Not during these meetings, but in the last decade, I know we did have a, TQA, I think it was, for the Navajo Nation. We had that language for people who wanted to call in and speak with somebody, I think. We had that available for them. But that's the only language that I know of. Nobody else has brought anything up to our attention, other than the fact that we are aware of the folks that live out in the rural areas and on the reservations that may have English as a second language. Our regional offices are aware of those particular tribes and try to work and hire locally to get those folks enumerated.
Okay, any last questions? All right, then I'm going to turn it over to Shireen for our wrap-up.
Okay. Well, we've covered a lot of materials today, and we've spent a considerable time talking about both our operations and systems development. And just to note, we're very focused on that and on track for the 2018 end-to-end test and the 2020 census. We talked a lot about our key decisions. Many have been made, many more to be made, and we're utilizing our decision inventory to track our progress on that, integrating that into our schedule where appropriate. And we just want to conclude by hoping that you enjoyed today's presentations and demonstrations, and we look forward to future discussion and sharing of information. I do want to note that the next PMR is April 12th, so you can put that on your calendar. And before I say goodbye, I did want to really recognize Kim Higginbotham and her team, as well as the staff demoing all the software for the great work that they did. You know, Kim and her team were actually in gear last week doing all of this when we had the blizzard or whatever it was called. So just a round of applause to show our appreciation. And with that, just to have a great evening and a great weekend, and may the force be with you. Thank you all very much.